faster or cheaper, we've also got to keep in mind how this is going to impact people's lives and society, and make sure we're doing things in a beneficial way. So this presentation I've got today I've titled "The Geek Shall Inherit," which is kind of a bit of a spin on a biblical line, which is the meek shall inherit, saying that it's not going to be the kind of loud, outspoken people that inherit the kind of value of the earth. It would be the kind of meek, the softly spoken, the people who are kind of in the background more so. What you're looking at over the next couple of weeks is artificial intelligence. What I'll be speaking about in this presentation is the kind of diversity or lack thereof that we have in AI, and particularly in AI research. And how that if we have an uneven representation of people in that, we might see certain people deriving more value, kind of more than others from this type of technology. So it won't necessarily be the meek that inherit. It might not be evenly distributed across us, everyone that inherits. It could be the geeks instead that inherit. So when I was doing a bit of research, probably about a year ago now, I was trying to find just a very high-level general stat for how widespread is AI and automation. I can't remember exactly the number that we came up with. We found something online which was saying something like 70% of people by the year 2020 will use AI or automation in some way in their lives. You see that initially and think, sounds pretty significant. 70%, that's way over half. There's a lot of people using it. I kind of sat down for a second and thought, that's a load of rubbish. That's not true, because it's basically 99.9% of people right now, today. And if you think, like everyone in this room, I'm sure we're all fairly engaged with technology. We've all got, I say that, we all have smartphones around us, and we probably have some awareness of the fact that those phones are collecting data. That data is going to a company who's able to analyze it to improve some service or to build some sort of knowledge based on that data. But you might have someone, kind of, say a family member, a friend who you don't think really engages with technology in that sort of obvious way. You know, they might not have a smartphone, they possibly don't have a computer or the internet at home. You might still imagine that they have a television or the radio at home. And still, those types of technologies are going to be kind of governed by AI data and automation, where that television network aren't just putting on shows kind of purely kind of pulling out the video, yeah, we think we'll make a show on this now, and we'll put this advert in these breaks. And they'll be deciding based on what people are watching at what times, what things those people are interested in, what shows they're most likely to watch, and what products they're likely to buy in the advert breaks in those shows to fund more and to make a profit. Then you might think, all right, so we've got someone who doesn't really like radio, doesn't like TVs. Do they have any interaction with AI, any interaction with automation in a way? Even if that person leaves their house, I think in any way they'll interact with it. So it could be that they get on a bus or they get on a train, and it will be traffic light priorities managed by data, trying to optimize that traffic flow. If they get into a shop, most shops are going to be using AI and data in some way. So that can sometimes be, even if you're not connecting to the Wi-Fi network, they can kind of see what the SSID or the MAC address is of your phone and trace roughly what route you're taking around the store, and know based on that which order they should put the products in that store in order to make you buy different products, to upsell, to cross-sell you. So this picture is supposed to be the one remaining person in the world who isn't using AI or automation in some way. But then you kind of visualize yourself as this person. You might kind of find yourself in the shack one day. First day you go out, you have to collect water, so you traipse all the way down to the one clean water source, and you go 2 miles back to your shack, and by the time you're there, you've only got a little dribble left in it. You're thinking, this is really stupid, I should do something. I don't know, a system of pipes and a pump. Maybe I could, automate getting the water into my shack. So I think it's really just a natural thing where we are inclined to automate different things in our lives. And I'm kind of standing in front of it, but the interest point here is in this lower corner. Technology is not necessarily neutral. So this is something where, thankfully, this doesn't exist anymore. But you used to be able to go onto Amazon and look at this length of cotton rope, and it would say, frequently bought together wooden stool. So yeah, it's a bad one. It's one where we as humans can understand how it reached this conclusion. So we're thinking, okay, so AI's got this kind of data set of people that bought cotton ropes. It saw there was also a high level of correlation, like a strong pattern between people buying cotton ropes and wooden stools. If I put this here, I might be able to make a cross-sell and make a bit of extra money. Basic inference is made there, but we as humans can understand why it's got there. We can understand that that's someone possibly in a very vulnerable state of mind, that it's someone who is possibly contemplating suicide when they're looking at that. And they don't want to see this sort of thing put in front of them. It makes it worse where we're thinking, this is what we would classify as a recommendation algorithm. So it's recommending to the person looking at the piece of cotton rope that they go ahead with it. If you kind of understand how it works as well, you might think, oh, well, I'm not alone in having this sort of consideration, because otherwise how would Amazon make this? So I suppose the argument there is humans can see that same thing, but never would we put those two pieces of data next to each other. But AI, if we're not being careful about our application, could do. Thankfully, that doesn't exist anymore. So another story here. It comes from Indiana State, so a state in America. I don't particularly know why, but their citizens, they call themselves Hoosiers. And there was this government campaign where it's kind of this picture in the background where they found there was a certain amount of money being stored up on these cards, where this is kind of their benefits, storing up a load of money, and that might have been spent in places which people didn't like. So they were saying there was an amount of money spent in places like off licenses and tobacconists, or at least withdrawn in those places. And a governor kind of went up for election. They were saying, my campaign's based on automating this system. We're going to bring in a piece of technology that makes completely rational choices for who should get their financial benefits as well as Medicaid. I think there are already some arguments against this where they were saying that money taken out in off licenses and tobacconists doesn't mean they were spending it there. I don't know if you've been to kind of the more sort of rundown areas, even in the UK, but you find there far more often you'll have cash machines inside of shops like that because it's a bit more secure. It's less likely that those cash machines are going to be robbed. So they put them in those places. Doesn't mean people were spending money on alcohol or cigarettes, just means they got money out there. Besides, it's not as if anyone else in the world, whether or not they're claiming benefits is necessarily more or less likely to spend money on that type of product. We don't. People who have feel wrong on those 30 sheets, it would tell them that they're not getting their benefits or they're not getting their medicine because of a failure to cooperate. And it wouldn't tell them at which point they failed to cooperate, just that they had. And they'd have to go through the system again from the very start, and that could mean several months of not having any financial kind of care or your medicine in place at that point. Another problem we get here, we kind of have this idea that Big Brother is watching you, like the George Orwell concept that our smartphones are listening and collecting data on absolutely everything we're doing, and there's the CCTV going around and all of your internet browsing, your location history is being tracked. And Big Brother is watching you. We almost wish we were doing that. What normally ends up being the case is more like Big Brother is watching us. So we do have an awful lot of data. It's quite true that that data around your smartphones, around your location, is being tracked and is being collected and stored. But it costs an awful lot of money for us to be able to analyze that data on such an individual basis, to be able to create that sort of demographic of one, where it's really analysing what's going to happen based on your own individual motivations, your own individual actions. Instead, we use demographics. So it takes us a lot less time and effort and data if we're going to say, instead of exactly your motivation, exactly what you've done, we're going to say people like you, people who are in a similar age bracket, who have got a similar educational history. It doesn't necessarily mean they share your motivations or will take the same actions as you. We're just kind of bounding people into the same group because it's easier. So this is the situation we got with the system. It was similar to, I don't know if I'm being too kind of old and dated in this, but there was an old sketch, Little Britain, and someone applies for a bank loan and the person says, oh, I don't know, the computer says no. The human doesn't know why the computer said no, but that's kind of what happened. This particular story I found from a book called Automating Inequality. The author, Virginia Eubanks, talks about this as being a layer of ethical abstraction, where if you are kind of being a person there without an automated system behind you, you're much more likely to think, okay, so something's gone wrong and we've rejected your medical care, but we're going to find a way to make this work. I don't want to be the person who is rejecting that from you. But if you've got the AI there, you're kind of saying, well, that's what the computer said, and I've been told the computer is rational. It only makes correct decisions based on the data that's been given into it. So that's what the computer says, that's what we're going to go ahead with. Bit of Rick and Morty here, this is newer. So this is in Rick's car where he's created a battery with these kind of aliens, and the aliens are stepping on this thing to make a little bit of excess power to power his car. And his grandson Morty says, well, that just sounds like slavery with extra steps. I think Virginia Eubanks' point in this is more like murder or manslaughter with extra steps. We're just abstracting ourselves from responsibility by having AI or automation in the process before us. And this is the book if you are interested. I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to skip a little bit. So imagine, if you will, I've done this from far more of a work scenario, but imagine you've kind of got up in the morning, you've got ready, you've kind of left, you get into school, you're going in past reception of the school, and you see the person there. They look exactly like you. They kind of have the same interests as you as well. So you say hi, they say hi, back in exactly the same way. You get into class with all of your classmates, everyone is dressed in the same way. You all talk about what you did the kind of evening before, and you all did exactly the same things, you got the same interests. So that was a kind of dull class, talking about the same things. You kind of finish school and you're going to go out with your friends. And again, you have conversations, but you're talking about the same sort of TV shows that you will watch. And when you're talking about that, you have the same sort of values and interests in them. So no one's really saying, oh no, I thought that was a load of rubbish. If someone says that, yeah, I agree with you, it was rubbish. You all just share the same exact values, thoughts, and opinions. And if you were wondering who took the photo on that night out, it's you, still, in the reflection in the glasses. And is that really a world that we want? I'm no scientist, as it will be obvious from my thing here, but if we didn't have any sort of diversity in the universe, we would probably have this kind of greyish sludge, which is just about half a degree above absolute zero, but we don't. Instead of that, we have stars, planets in the universe, because we have these kind of different concentrations of energy around them. Okay, so this is looking at representation of women in Silicon Valley jobs. So you've got graphs here for the different big tech companies. So in non-tech jobs, it's fairly even. It's roughly around 50% for all. But we're more interested in the yellow bar. So in 2014, you've got kind of anything from bad to think Apple is the best of 20% women in tech jobs, down to Twitter, was it 10% there? Picking out two of these, only because I've got some slightly more recent stats. So in 2014, we had 17% at Google in tech jobs and 15% in Facebook for tech jobs. So we can go on from 2014 to, I believe, 2017. So we see that 17% has grown to 21%, and at Facebook it's grown to 22%. The new stat we have here is in AI, and this is actually in AI research specifically. So it's based on the names of AI research papers, 10% and 15%. Slightly more recent stat again, we've got the World Economic Forum. So they had some reports about the gender pay gap, so it's saying how long it would take for the kind of jobs that men and women are doing to make them earn equivalent amounts of money. They calculated 202 years to address the gender pay gap. We can correlate this with AI because they're quite high-paid jobs. It's 1 year further ahead, so we've got 201 years left. Do we think we have 201 years to address that, or do we end up with? Just about in time. Yeah, so it's a Childish Gambino lyric. Men who make machines that want what they decide. And the point in that being, the World Economic Forum stat, it's saying the gender pay gap really, it's different to equal pay, so it's absolutely illegal that you would have two people working in the same job earning different amounts of money on the same career level. But it's really saying that men and women are working in different types of jobs, or at different levels of seniority in those jobs. And based on that, it ends up that men earn quite a lot more than women. They think it will take, at the current rate of progress, 201 years for that difference to be even. And we can somewhat link that to AI and data science because, particularly in places like Silicon Valley, they are extremely well-paid jobs. You've got people there earning well over $1,000 per year as data scientists. And with that 201 years remaining, we can see some things that have happened just in the last year. So OpenAI in February this year, they had an announcement about something called GPT-2. It's this language generation algorithm where you'll feed it in with a prompt sentence, so you give it generally a couple sentences of text, and it will feed out a few paragraphs afterwards. And this was something where OpenAI, they're kind of historically categorized by being open, where they'll often give you the full code base to what they created, as well as a white paper telling you how they went about building it. But that was different in this case. They didn't give us the full code base. They gave us a very limited version of the model, which was roughly 1/10 as complex or performant as the full model, just so that we can have a kind of play and see what it does. And their concerns there was its ability to create things like not necessarily fake news, but poorly researched news or impersonating people. This is technology which exists today. We're not waiting another 201 years for this. And their example text, you could kind of see it, read it, and think, you know, if I weren't specifically told in advance that this was generative text written by an AI, I would have thought a human wrote it. I would have thought it was fairly well-written human news. Especially the kind of behavior of us reading news. It's typically kind of waking up, going through BBC News, quickly scrolling through, looking for a few keywords, but not checking the exact nuance of how it's written it. That's the type of thing it can create very well. I do believe there is bias in the model of this. So I've run a bit of a test, feeding it prompts like the X is A, feeding that X with words like banker, homemaker, CEO, and it will have bias towards different genders in what it's going to suggest, whether that's male or female. That's not something we want. It seems to be as though it fairly, with the complexity of the model increasing, it gets closer and closer to the societal bias. So actually the least complex model is the least biased one in this instance for CEO. The more complex model is more biased because it's trending towards the societal one where it's something like 4 times more likely that a man is a CEO than a woman, which is not something that we want. So it's trending closer to the societal bias, but what GPT-2 does there is productionize the text and effectively create it on a volume which we could never do ourselves. We might hold our reporters to a higher standard than we do other writers. So, you know, as much as that might be true in society, we might expect someone writing for a newspaper to be mindful that we don't want to have that kind of that entrenched in society, so that they would do different things, write in a different way to encourage more diversity in those roles. GPT-2 won't necessarily do that. It could just entrench and accelerate that type of bias. We've got things like this. This is a living portrait from Samsung. We could have this to like a kind of wider type of technology. If you've heard of GAN's generative adversarial models, which are used to make things like deepfakes. So there was a video of Barack Obama saying some ridiculous things, but he never said that. That was purely someone using a piece of AI to animate his face, create a voice behind him, which made it sound like he was saying these crazy things. It doesn't even need to be powered by some sort of thing which is coming out in 20 years, 30 years in the future. Someone achieved the same effect with an American political candidate, Nancy Pelosi. All they did, they slowed the video down by something like 10 to 15%. People saw that video, thought, oh, she sounds like she's slurring her words. Is she well? Is she healthy enough to be a candidate? A few weeks later, people figured out that it was a slowed down video and posted the original and said, no, this isn't true. But still, she lost an awful lot of votes based on that, even after the kind of truth was uncovered. It still kind of left that seed in people's mind that, yeah, but perhaps she is too old. So I suppose my call here is really, do we think we have that much time to address this problem, 201 years at the current rate of change, before AI is being too influential? I would personally say that we don't have 201 years to wait until we address these kind of bias and diversity issues in AI, that we need to be doing things sooner and finding ways that we can be more inclusive, including more people in the development community, as well as building their values into the things that we create. If you are interested, there's a meetup community I run. It's going to be difficult to scan this, but if you are on meetup.com, it's AI Ethics London, as well as I write and publish some things on this on Medium as well, so easiest way is just to search my name. I think I did that roughly. I was trying to be quite quick. Was I close to 15 minutes?
Perfect.
Cool. Do we want to do a couple of questions, or am I...
Is there
yeah.
any questions?
Cool. Any burning questions? No. Okay. Right, well, thank you. If there are any questions after this, feel free to kind of use any of the obvious channels online to contact me. But thanks for having me, and I hope you have a great few weeks in.